Solutions to healthcare problems, how much money we can spend on the groceries, finding solutions to help people understand what are the right choices to make for you and your family.
Tonight, credit card late fees could be coming way down. How far and how soon? Then, Super Tuesday is here. Will Nikki Haley stay in the race after today? And an explosive solution to restoring the ecosystem on the CBS Evening News.
Over the past few weeks, we've been on a rocket to the Republican nomination. It's been a rocket.
That's the part he doesn't get. This isn't about him. This is about the American people.
Joe has spent his entire career lifting up women.
President Joe Biden knows how to work across the aisle and across every level of government to make progress.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in New York. Can you believe it? They let me come to New York, and we even broke out those special whiz-bang graphics that lets you know that this is a special edition of America Decides Super Tuesday. 16 states, and don't forget, America and Samoa are holding presidential nominating contests today. And in 15 of those states, voters will decide between former President Donald Trump and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Trump, as we know, has a big lead in the delegates and in polling, and we expect that delegate lead tonight to grow quite possibly substantially. Now, here's how the evening is going to play out. The earliest polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern, but at this moment, we are awaiting the first exit polling coming to our data desk from voters in North Carolina and Virginia. My colleague, Anthony Salvanto, is examining those numbers now and will bring them to us shortly. But first, let's go to our CBS News political reporters who are in the field. Olivia Rinaldi is at Mar-a-Lago with the Trump campaign. Nydia Cavazos is following the Haley campaign in South Carolina. Torian Small is talking to voters in Charlotte, North Carolina. Olivia, I want to begin with you. Set the scene for us at Mar-a-Lago. What are the expectations?
Good evening, Major. Yeah, we're here at Mar-a-Lago for the media watch party tonight that is happening. We're expecting about 1,000 or so guests. Trump is going to come and speak later this evening. I spoke with a Trump campaign official earlier tonight who told me they are expecting to have a very good night here. The campaign is expecting that they will sweep all 15 states that Republicans are competing in tonight. But on a broader speaking level about narratively where this race goes now, they say this is about uniting the Republican Party going forward. Not only is it about defeating Haley, but they want to make sure that the party is in lockstep moving forward and turning towards Joe Biden in November. So that's really where they're focusing tonight. Something I'm watching is Virginia, however. That is an open primary and one of the first states to close. And there we should be able to see how some of independents are voting today. That's going to be crucial. And that is something that Donald Trump is going to need come November. Do some of those people come over and vote for former President Donald Trump? That is something we are watching very closely here tonight.
Olivia, thank you very much. I want to turn now to Nydia Cavazos, who's in South Carolina with the Haley campaign. One of the questions, Nydia, is how Nikki Haley will watch the results coming in tonight. As I understand it, there's not a watch party. Is that a sign that they're not looking forward to what's coming?
Good afternoon, Major. Well, it is a pretty quiet day out here in Charleston, South Carolina. As you said, there is no watch party for tonight. There is no event, no public appearances, nothing on Haley's schedule as far as today, and nothing for this Wednesday. I've confirmed this personally with Haley's campaign. Now, of course, we can interpret this in many ways, but as far as Haley's campaign, they've said that this is officially a travel day for her, as she had been campaigning during the past 10 days up and down across the country, crisscrossing different states ahead of Super Tuesday. Now, of course, we leave it up to the political analysts to analyze what this means, the fact that we're not seeing Haley tonight. Now, as far as Super Tuesday, Haley has been clear throughout the past days on the campaign trail that she's focused on Super Tuesday. She says we need to let these states vote first. And she's also said, she's told us many times during several gaggles during the past days that she's not looking ahead, that first she needs to focus on Super Tuesday because she needs more Americans to be able to vote and to cast their ballot, and then they will reassess. Now, as far as Haley's campaign, who I spoke spoke to some members just this morning. They're saying that the mood is more of a happy tone. They're listening to music. This is officially one of their statements. They're playing music, they're having fun, and this is what we can expect from this tonight. Now, of course, all of this plays into the tone that they've taken during the past days on the campaign trail. I've been with them throughout these past 10 days across the U.S. Now, they're well aware of what's at stake tonight, and they're well aware of what the odds are, but they're not stopping. And Haley, though she has remained vague on her answers as to what competitive means to her, that's all we've really gotten from her. She says the point tonight is to remain as competitive as I possibly can as far as Super Tuesday.
Nikki, one other question I have for you. Nikki Haley said earlier this week she no longer feels bound by the Republican National Committee's pledge that they made to get on the debate stage earlier in this campaign to support the eventual Republican nominee. Has she said anything more about that? And does that indicate that she may not, even if this is a bad night for her, endorse former President Trump if he becomes the Republican nominee?
Well, since Haley said this past weekend, you know, she's been questioned on this several times, and her answers are always interesting, but she'll always avoid giving a direct answer, I should say, in terms of she'll turn it back on us, the reporters, and she'll say, why don't you guys go and ask former President Donald Trump if he's going to support me and if he'd be willing to sign that pledge. And of course, now we see a complete change in her, whereas in the debate, she once said she would sign this pledge and she would support whoever the nominee would be to the Republican Party. But of course, now she's saying that this is just a piece of paper and she's not bound by this. And this is also a reflection of the tone she's taken during the past days on the campaign trail, pretty much saying, you know, why don't you guys ask these questions to Donald Trump? I don't see you all asking them, so I don't necessarily have to answer that. This is more so the tone that we're getting from Haley.
Nydia, thank you so very much. I want to talk to Torian Small now in Charlotte, North Carolina. Forgive me. Charleston is in South Carolina. I know my geography well enough. In Charlotte, North Carolina. Torian, I know you've been talking to voters at polling places throughout the day. Give us a sense of what's either on the mind or if there's a detectable level of high or low enthusiasm based on what you've been able to see.
Yeah, Major, I was previously in Charleston. Now I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. But what's interesting, a lot of voters that I talked to are looking ahead to November. Many of the Republicans out today weren't really talking about the primary. They told me that this is a foregone conclusion that Donald Trump would be the nominee. So they're looking at defending or showing a force of strength for the Republican Party and the presumptive nominee in their minds. On the Democrat side, I got some interesting answers from voters when I asked what was bringing them out to the polls. Democracy was a through line, really. A lot of folks concerned by what another Trump administration would mean for the state of democracy. There were also a few, not too many, not like we've seen in Michigan, but a few uncommitted Democrats, very unsatisfied with the Biden administration's response to the Israel-Hamas conflict. So we're seeing quite a bit of tension within the Democratic Party, not so much on the Republican side, but again, this is one of, or actually it's the only battleground state at play here at Super Tuesday. And many folks that I talked to in both the Republican and Democratic parties say that they believe in November this would definitely be a state at play.
Torian Small in North Carolina, thank you so very much. Also, my thanks to Olivia Rinaldi and Nydia Cavazos. And stay with CBS News all night for our continuing coverage of Super Tuesday. You can join me at 8 p.m. Eastern for a special edition of America Decides as we get the latest results from across the country. Senior spokesperson for the Biden campaign joins us next to discuss the challenges, and there may be many of them, that will face the president's re-election campaign. But before we go, throughout this hour, we're going to do something we really enjoy. We're going to take a look at iconic Super Tuesday moments that have shaped elections and our memory of previous elections. 4 years ago, President Biden's campaign went from almost dead, well, to prime position. Let's take a listen.
So I'm here to report we are very much alive. And make no mistake about it, this campaign will send Donald Trump packing.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
If China invades Taiwan, what will the U.S. Navy do?
Here in Tel Aviv, second siren in about 10 minutes. This Humvee just pulled up and said, it's time to leave.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Stories start with the who, what, when, and where. But it's why it's important to you that matters most. Knowing what to ask is how you open the door to a deeper understanding. See you on Prime Time, streaming free everywhere.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression.
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme.
Record-breaking storm surge and devastating wind.
Every second counts.
The mud punched a hole right through the wall.
See, hear, feel the forecast. Tonight on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Welcome back to America Decides. This is video from earlier today taken in Fairfax, Virginia polling place. As we have learned throughout this campaign season, abortion access is one of the main issues driving at least some voters to the polls, and it's become a top concern in states like Virginia. CBS News campaign reporter Shauna Mizell is talking to voters at a polling place in Alexandria, Virginia. Shauna, what have you heard today?
Good evening, Major. Great to be with you. I've spoken with a plethora of voters here in Virginia today, and many of them are here to support President Joe Biden in his efforts to be reelected to the White House. Reproductive rights is definitely at the top of mind for many of these voters, but I think something that is especially important for them is that they have a sense of fear of what a second term from former President Donald Trump would look like.
And when they talk about reproductive health care and access to it, what are they thinking about? Are they talking about the most recent headlines about IVF or just abortion access in general? Have they specified anything that's at the top of their mind, Shauna?
One woman that I spoke with earlier today said that if Donald Trump is reelected, that Republicans would come for birth control. So certainly IVF, abortion, it all falls under that reproductive rights umbrella. And they see Joe Biden as the candidate that at least is out on the campaign trail saying that he would try to restore some of those protections that were provided by Roe versus Wade. But another thing that I want to bring up that was pretty profound from one of the women I spoke with today, she was in her 60s, and she said that voting used to be about coming out and supporting the candidate that you like. But she said it's now turned into coming out and supporting the candidate that is running against the person that you don't like.
And Shauna, any sense from that polling location that you're at in Arlington that what turnout has been like today? Are poll workers telling you high, low, medium, about average? What are they telling you?
I'd say definitely about average. It was extremely rainy earlier today. We've been out here since 6 in the morning. Started to see it pick up once the rain dissipated, but it's about average here today. Not too busy, not too slow.
Excellent. Shauna Mizell, thank you so very much. Biden campaign is expecting a shift to the general election after tonight, if it hasn't begun already. Senior spokesman for the Biden campaign, Kevin Munoz, joins us now from Wilmington, Delaware. Kevin, I just suggested that the general election and its framing has already begun. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Look, what's going to be really clear tonight to a bulk of the American people that have been focused on their everyday life is that this is going to be a rematch between President Biden and Donald Trump. And so by all the metrics that matter to us as we look towards this general election, we are on stronger positioning. We have a stronger coalition. Donald Trump has seen huge divisions. He does have an operation for a general election campaign. We have $130 million behind us. And on the issues, we are on the right side of abortion rights, gun violence, and tax cuts. And that's what we're going to focus on in this race.
Is North Carolina a battleground state for your campaign? And if so, why?
Look, North Carolina is a state where the Biden-Harris coalition is strong, and we really have the resources earlier than ever to talk to voters about the issues that we know matter to them. You saw MAGA Republicans in that state actively override a veto on an abortion ban, and we know this is an issue that matters so much to so many voters. So we're going to be talking to people across the state. We announced to state staff there already, and we'll be talking there aggressively.
Kevin, as you well know, there are two polling Achilles heels for the president's reelection campaign: perceptions of the economy and what his policies have done to people's pocketbooks, and immigration. How do you turn those two around, or can you?
Well, look, I think it's really important to understand that there's only one guy in this race that is focused on solutions and making the lives of the American people better. When it comes to immigration, Joe Biden worked in good faith with Senate Republicans to deal a tough and fair set of standards to reform our immigration system. When it comes to the economy, Joe Biden got us out of COVID and has lowered costs for the American people and created opportunity. I think what we want the American people to understand is that there's a choice between action and inaction, and Joe Biden is fighting for the middle class here. We know polls come and go, and we're going to continue to focus on taking that message to every single American that will decide this election.
Kevin, you're experienced. You're not a novice at this at all. You know what consistent polling data says. It means it's more than a trend. It's becoming almost concretized. On an immigration and the economy, the president, as a re-election candidate, is behind both Trump on both of those issues.
Oh, look, there was a poll this morning that had us up in Pennsylvania. There was a poll last night that had us up nationally. I think we are looking at the full suite of polls and also elections. And when you look at election after election, Joe Biden is consolidating his base because they know the stakes of this election, whereas Donald Trump is seeing serious hemorrhaging with the voters that'll decide this election, including those in the suburbs and women voters. At the same time, Major, we know we have to earn, not ask for the support of our coalition. So we're going to put in the work. And the good news is we have the resources and time to do just that.
What are you looking at tonight, Kevin, as you see results coming in? There are efforts to, if not replicate what happened in Michigan, 100,000 or so voters voting uncommitted, but in other states like Minnesota, Massachusetts, Colorado, California, some efforts to try to get uncommitted to send another signal to the Biden White House about Israel, Gaza, and if not dissatisfaction, a look for some other either rhetoric or policies there.
Well, first of all, we're encouraged that every American is participating in our democracy, and that's a top-line difference between us and Donald Trump, who has actively worked to undermine our democracy. Look, I think we were really encouraged last week in Michigan to see 600,000 Michiganders turn out in an uncontested primary for the president, and we know that we're going to continue to replicate those turnout standards across the primaries. We're also going to be looking at what's happening on the Republican side. What I said earlier, we're seeing serious issues for Donald Trump with some of the key voters that we think are gettable. So we're going to be talking to them and the original coalition that sent us to the White House back in 2020 and reaching them throughout this cycle.
Kevin, you mentioned a moment ago resources. You do have more campaign cash than former President Trump does, and it's not close. But that campaign cash only materializes in ways that can move polls if you're spending it and spending it on things people can see. When is that going to start happening?
Well, look, I think we've been starting in earnest to reach the coalition that is decisive to this election back in August with a historic investment into Black and Hispanic media. At the same time, we know the work that we need to do, especially come spring and summer, when voters are finally deciding and thinking about the choice that's going to be in front of them. So throughout this month, throughout the spring and the summer, you're going to see more offices opening. You're going to see a paid media program really begin to scale up and be doing the outreach that we know matters, person to person, friend to friend, about the stakes of this election and how Joe Biden is delivering for them.
Coming to us from Wilmington, Delaware, the campaign headquarters of Biden-Harris, Kevin Munoz, thank you so very much. We're getting a first look at that exit polling data. Next, we will analyze what voters in key states are saying. But first, when Super Tuesday came around in 2008, John McCain had his eye on the general election. In his speech that night, he argued how his Republican Party could maintain the White House despite President Bush's unpopularity and a very shaky U.S. economy.
The, quote, independence voters and, frankly, the old Reagan Democrats will come our way because I think we will have a message that will appeal to all of them. I would emphasize, I see, in all due respect, the two Democratic candidates moving further and further to the left.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This is CBS.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. CBS News is getting a first look at what is on the mind of voters casting ballots this Super Tuesday. To help us break it down, our exit polling data and the analysis thereof. Let's bring in CBS News' Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, first impressions. These are pieces of data from Virginia and North Carolina. What is jumping out to you?
Right. A couple of early voting states, right? Early states tonight. But one of the things we're going to look through throughout this night is how many independents or self-identified independents, even Democrats sometimes in places where they can, are going to come into these primaries, come into these Republican primaries, ostensibly maybe to support Nikki Haley, maybe to cast a vote against Donald Trump, and then how many Republicans are going to be there and what kind of support can she get and he get among Republicans, because that's the base, right?
So what does it say at Virginia?
So take a look at this. So already we're seeing at Virginia, 29% of the voters there say they consider themselves independents, and another 12% say that they're Democrats. So you're already starting to see that influx. I want to take this one step further. When you get the results tonight, when you talk about can Nikki Haley exceed expectations, et cetera, these are going to be in the mix. That may help her exceed expectations. We don't know yet, but that kind of will be in the mix.
And a quick note for the audience, these numbers will shift as the evening progresses because they are still being assembled. The exit poll data, correct?
Yes, so everybody knows very transparently, CBS News and the network send interviewers to randomly selected polling places around the states. We interview people as they leave the polls. We talk to people who voted by absentee, by telephone, and then we put that together in the model, and you get this initial exit poll. But since people are still voting, these will get updated.
Anything else jumping out to you based on what we've seen so far, Anthony?
Yeah, part of that same story, Major, which is this. Here's North Carolina, for example. Will you support the nominee in November, no matter who it is? For Haley voters, 21% yes.
Okay.
That's not a lot.
No, that's not. That's suggesting that there is a barrier for the Trump campaign to get those people over for the general election if he becomes the Republican nominee. And certainly tonight, there will be a very large springboard in that direction.
It'll at least be something that'll give the Biden campaign voters of a type to look at, right? A lot of folks who are Republicans historically will come home. Historically, if you're a Republican, you're going to come back to Donald Trump or the Republican nominee. But does this suggest that there are people the Biden campaign may then go target? Hey, we know you're dissatisfied. That's something to watch.
And Nikki Haley's recent rhetoric that she's not so sure she's going to support the eventual Republican nominee is aligned with these voters. Anything else jumping out to you so far?
Yeah. The other thing here I'm going to watch all night, the education split.
Right.
Donald Trump traditionally has gotten a working class vote, a
non-college
educated vote, or a degree holding vote. But Nikki Haley has been doing better with college graduates. That's already in the patterns here, and that's something to watch throughout the night because, of course, these are the types of voters that often split. Right? Democrats will go after college graduates. Joe Biden needs to win college graduates in a lot of these states. So that'll be another target. Start to tell us what might be in play come November.
Have you seen anything in the data so far, Anthony, that would represent good news for the Trump campaign?
Well, it's too early to characterize these states because people are still voting, right? So what you want to do is say, okay, this is what's on people's minds so far. And then we'll go forward, and I'll just say to everybody, stay tuned, because it's 7 o'clock. These polls are closed, and we'll start
7:30 in North Carolina, 7 o'clock in Virginia.
And 7:30 in North Carolina, and I will be able to start to answer that very good question.
Excellent. Anthony Salvanto, and as you just indicated, we'll be coming back to you. This is a promise, not a threat, throughout the evening. Our CBS News local stations have a front row seat to many of the contests and the biggest issues facing voters tonight. Here are what some of my colleagues across the country are watching tonight.
I'm Sean Boyd, chief political reporter for CBS Colorado, and tonight we are watching the state's presidential primary after the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that votes for Donald Trump will count. The Secretary of State printed ballots with Trump's name on them, awaiting the high court's decision. Colorado is heavily weighted with independents who can vote either the Republican or Democratic ballot. As of this morning, 29% of active eligible voters had turned in their ballots, with Republicans outvoting Democrats.
One of the biggest races we're watching in the Lone Star State is for U.S. Senate, specifically the Democratic primary. North Texas Congressman Colin Allred leads a crowded field in the polls, and he may win outright and avoid a runoff. His biggest competitor is State Senator Roland Gutierrez of San Antonio, a progressive Democrat who was the most outspoken state lawmaker for gun restrictions after the tragedy in Uvalde. Allred is more moderate and has raised more money than anyone, including Republican incumbent Ted Cruz, who's seeking a third term. While Cruz won a very close race in 2018, analysts say it will be a big challenge for a Democrat to unseat him this year. Border security is the top issue in Texas, and every Republican is running on this issue, but not the Democrats.
I'm Christina Hager in Boston, Massachusetts. This is a state where more than half of the voters are registered as unenrolled. That means they can choose whichever ballot they want to fill out for the primary election, either Democrat or Republican, and they can wait right up until the last minute when they walk in. So we're watching to see how it all plays out, not only here in Massachusetts, but also for the elections in Maine and Vermont.
Thank you all for your reporting. I want to bring in CBS News political director Finn Gomez for some analysis on this Super Tuesday. Finn, this isn't a typical Super Tuesday where there is actually real competition. It's going to be kind of a walkover tonight for former President Trump and President Biden. What does that tell us about where the general election campaign sits?
I spoke to folks from both of those camps, senior advisors to both President Biden and also to former President Trump, and they tell me that this is the unofficial start of the general election. Like tonight will be the night where we pivot and we get into the general election mode. Typically, as you said, traditionally, it's.
You can stand up. Oop. Well, we're going to do that. Interesting. One of the things we like to do here is kind of have an informal approach. So we're going to adjust your seat right as we're talking on camera.
Yeah.
Keep going on, please.
So just we are looking at the general election. They're looking at the general election. They see this tonight as the big pivot point to the general election.
And Kevin Munoz for the Biden campaign was just on here and said, we have more resources than the Trump campaign, and we're going to use them, and that's why they're at a structural disadvantage. What's the Trump campaign have to say about that?
They are going to be aggressive, they say.
Aggressive what? Raising money?
Raising money. They know that they're at a disadvantage as it stands right now. They believe they can make up ground as they pivot into the general election. And they believe, even though the Biden and the DNC have a bigger war chest, that they have time. They have 8 months, and now that they believe that everyone's focused on Trump, now they can raise money.
And looking at the polling data, they would also, I think, argue, well, whatever the structural money advantage the White House and the Biden campaign might have, we have two big issues working in our favor: immigration and inflation.
Yeah, and I think those are two of the big issues, and we're seeing it in the exit polls. It's not just Texas and California. Yes, those states are part of those 16 that are voting today, but it's throughout all the landscape. I mean, you're looking at these exit polls in North Carolina and in Virginia, arguably two battleground states, and those are the leading issues. So they feel they are, and as we've seen in our own polling, the Trump people feel that they have, they're in a better place when it comes to that issue as they pivot to the general election, but the Biden folks also believe strongly that they can make up ground on that in that area.
And when you talk to the Biden campaign, there's this assumption that the president is going to be nearer to the White House, nearer to the Rose Garden, than out on the hustings aggressively campaigning. What is their analysis of how much the country is going to see the president battling for re-election outside of the White House?
Look, I think that there is going to be an increase. We've seen that already. There's going to be more political trips. There's also going to be, frankly, more surrogates. We've seen the First Lady out there. We've seen the Vice President out there. We're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see, like, her, on key issues, like we saw, like on Gaza. She's been very outspoken.
The Vice President, yes.
Vice President. And she's been very outspoken on abortion access, abortion rights, on the IVF debate. And those are areas that they feel they can win. They can mobilize their coalition, if you will. And we know what they need, Major. They need young voters. They need women voters. They need suburban voters and college-age voters to really reassemble and hold on to that coalition that was so successful for them in 2020.
Speaking about abortion, the former president kind of dips his toe into that water and then takes it back out. He seems to be very cautious about being pinned down about what he's actually in favor of, although it has been reported, and he has sort of leaned into the idea that he's in favor of a 16-week federal abortion ban, which the Biden-Harris campaign says, okay, we're going to drive that and drive that hard. Yes, and it is an issue, I think, there's this cloud of confusion exactly coming from the Trump camp and where he's going to land. And how the Democrats want to try to pin them down. Oh, absolutely. That's something that they feel that they can flip it. It's political jiu-jitsu, they feel, that they can gain on that. And they believe, again, they have the upper hand. They do have to make up some ground, though. They do believe that with the Latino vote, which is so crucial in Nevada and Arizona,
Arizona's big in the news today, but like where that Latino vote is something they feel could be slipping away to some degree. And they really needed to solidify that support. And will they have the same amount that they had in 2020? That's a big question that will remain throughout the cycle.
For the Trump campaign, very quickly, Finn, when they look at the map of 2020, what's the state that they lost that they think they have the best chance of winning back?
Well, right now they feel very strongly about all those states. Michigan, the seven. If we're looking at the 7 battleground states,
right.
They do feel strongly about Michigan and Wisconsin.
Ahead of Arizona and Georgia.
Arizona as well, and Georgia, absolutely. Arizona.
They're going to say all 7.
Yeah, they're going to say all 7.
Okay.
But Pennsylvania looks very blue to me.
And Finn, I just want to let you know I'm very glad your chair is at the proper height. That was really cool.
I finally can see you eye to eye.
Exactly. Finn Gomez, thank you so much for being with us. And reminder, stay with CBS News all night long for our continuing coverage of Super Tuesday. Join me at 8 p.m. Eastern for a special edition of America Decides as the latest results come pouring in. Vivek Ramaswamy began this election cycle as one of Donald Trump's Republican opponents. Now he's one of the campaign's most loyal advocates. He joins us next, but before we go to break, 20 years ago, foreign policy was on the top of the mind of voters across the United States. And because the United States was, at that time, it's hard to remember, in the middle of 2 wars. John Kerry was ready to go on the offensive at that time against the Bush administration.
If George Bush wants to make national security the central issue of the campaign of 2004, I have 3 words for him that I know he understands. Bring it on!
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go. You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to America Decides. That is tape from earlier today, Bloomington, Minnesota. Voters going to the polls on this Super Tuesday. Donald Trump once faced several Republican opponents in the Republican primary. That number now is, of course, down to one, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. And several of those Republicans who ran against the former president, well, have since become endorsers, and some have become vocal and reliable supporters. One of them is Vivek Ramaswamy, who joins us now. Vivek, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
It's good to see you.
I know you know what it's like to run a campaign and make a decision to suspend it. If you were to give advice to Nikki Haley after tonight, what would it be?
Suspend the campaign. It's exactly what she should have done after New Hampshire. The fact of the matter is, what's interesting about tonight is Super Tuesday is not going to be the night that the Republican nominee is decided. That was decided long ago. I do think what's increasingly interesting after this Super Tuesday is the question of who the Democratic nominee is going to be. It is increasingly clear that the Democratic establishment has lost its patience and its use for Joe Biden. The polling numbers that came out recently, even the New York Times Siena polls, paint a very bleak picture for Biden's path, which is exactly why I think there's an increasing probability that it will not be Joe Biden. And so the path forward from here, the real story isn't about the Republican nominee. That story's done. It's been Donald Trump for a while, and it will remain Donald Trump after tonight. That part's the well-known part. So I think the subtext of what happens after tonight is what happens on the Democratic side.
Vivek, what I hear you saying is that at the Democratic National Convention, because that's the only place where this mechanism could play out, because the filing deadline for nearly all the primaries is closed. No one can get on the ballot and assemble the delegates. So this has to be sorted out at the Democratic National Convention. You're predicting, if I hear you correctly, a free-for-all there.
It doesn't necessarily have to be at the convention if Biden already foreordains, along with key party elders, who that nominee is going to be. But the key question is going to be the decision made by Biden, more likely his family and the people around him who are guiding him, to be able to say it's time for him to step aside, and somebody likely from the next generation, which is exactly what they're setting up for, to fill that void. I do think that this is a big danger for the Republicans, at least to be worried about, or at least thinking ahead to say that if we focus all of our political capital and our energy on Joe Biden, and we're playing against a bait and switch in the early summer, we're actually setting up for a surprise, which is why I think the Republican Party needs to focus on, and I think Donald Trump has done a good job of articulating our own alternative vision. Irrespective of Joe Biden, irrespective of his frailties, what do we actually stand for? Stand for borders, stand for meritocracy, stand for economic growth. That's part of what it means to actually be an American, and that's what Republicans need to stand for.
Vivek, when you say Republicans should be concerned, is there a Democrat not named Joe Biden you would be most concerned about in this scenario?
I don't think it comes down to which individual they put up. I think the real concern for Republicans is we can't expend all of our energy on just criticizing Joe Biden when Joe Biden is not going to be the nominee. And so I think that we don't have to be concerned if we focus on our own message. That's what I think President Trump has done a good job of doing. It's what I'm focused on, and I think other leaders across this party need to be focused on as well.
If Nikki Haley, Vivek, does not suspend her campaign and carries on for the next couple of weeks, what effect will that have on Republican unity?
I don't think it has a great effect on the Republican primary or Republican unity. I think it does have a big effect on exposing the rot that is the establishment in the Republican Party. The effect of donors who are propping her up long after the voters have said no, time and time again, making clear who they want their nominee to be. I got about 8% in Iowa. I wanted to be very clear. When I saw no path to getting nominated, I got out of the race so that we could have a decisive nominee. The fact that Nikki Haley is staying in long after the people of this country and the Republican primary base has said absolutely no to her reflects actually a deeper, I think, more sinister agenda here. That's to stop Trump at all costs, whether it's a puppet through the Democratic Party, through the Republican Party, or any other path. I think that's what Nikki Haley represents. Regardless, thankfully, after New Hampshire, certainly after Nevada and Michigan and South Carolina, now heading into Super Tuesday, she's long been irrelevant. And I think the real question turns to who that Democratic nominee is going to be.
Vivek, you came in tied for first at the CPAC straw poll for running mates for former President Trump. Would you jump on the ticket if asked?
Look, I think that I'm going to do whatever's required for the country. There's a lot of great candidates. I'm going to respect whatever decision President Trump makes. But my question is, how am I going to do my part to have a maximal positive impact on this country? First step in getting him reelected this November, and after that, 4 years of governing, where I know that his goal, and I think it's going to be everyone's goal involved, to make that second term so successful that it makes even that successful first term even look small by comparison. That, I think, is what's ahead for that second term of Trump. I'm looking forward to everything that we're going to accomplish. But for now, I think the focus is going to be on winning in November. And I want to say this, Major, is I do think that it can't just be a razor-thin margin this November. I think this is an opportunity for a decisive moral mandate, a Reagan 1980-style victory that, dare I say it, could unite this country. President Trump said it well recently. Success will be our vengeance. Success is unifying. Excellence is unifying. That's what makes America great. And I think that's a message that speaks to people, whether they're black or white, or even red or blue. That, I think, is a message that not only can deliver President Trump back to the White House with a decisive mandate, but unite and rebuild this country. And I know that's what he's focused on. And I'm going to do whatever is required heading into November and afterwards to help make this country a success.
Vivek, before I let you go, either conceptually or constitutionally, do you believe in absolute presidential immunity?
So look, this framing of absolute presidential immunity, with due respect, is the wrong framing. The question is, for actions that fall within the president's decision-making power as U.S. president, should the president be immune for decisions made as U.S. president? Absolutely. That's something the Supreme Court has held in the past. It has been a long-standing view, even dating back to the Nixon era, and for good reason. Because if a president is going to be second-guessed, you have presidents who have made decisions for where there have been collateral damage in places like Afghanistan to Iraq, civilian deaths, in other places around the world too. If a president could be sued after the fact for uncapped damages, that would constrain the decision that every president could make. So this issue is not about Donald Trump. It's about whether we want to have a U.S. president and a commander-in-chief who has the latitude to make the hard decisions without thinking about tort liability or lawsuits or even worse, criminal prosecution after leaving office. That's something our founding fathers never envisioned, and I don't think it's something that we should envision today either. So I do hope the Supreme Court comes down on the right side of this issue to say that for presidential actions executed while U.S. president, there should be no legal liability after office attached to it, let alone criminal liability.
Vivek Ramaswamy, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
The theme of tonight may be picking a party's nominee, but many congressional races, well, they might be effectively decided on this Super Tuesday night. We'll explain why. That's ahead. But first, 8 years ago, well, Donald Trump was shocking the political establishment. He might still be doing that. During his first run for the White House, here he was with then ally Chris Christie at his side following a dominant Super Tuesday performance back in 2016.
I would love to see the Republican Party and everybody get together and unify. And when we unify, there's nobody that's going to beat us.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Todd.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
but with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
Welcome back to America Decides on this Super Tuesday, because we're all about the voters. Here's some tape from Houston, Texas, where voters are participating in today's primary there. Of course, the marquee matchup on this Super Tuesday, President Biden and Donald Trump. But it's not just that. And there's, of course, Nikki Haley. We mentioned her. Congressional primaries are also underway in all the states. And according to an analysis from the organization Unite America, think about this. Up to 25% of the U.S. House could effectively be decided today. That's because of how many partisan districts there are. For example, whoever wins the Republican nomination in a deeply red district is virtually guaranteed to defeat their Democratic opponent in November, and vice versa on the Democratic side. Nick Troiano joins us now. He's the executive director of Unite America. Nick, I know you've done a lot of research on this. Explain to my audience and our audience how about a quarter of the House could basically be decided tonight without many people even realizing that.
That's right, Major. Most of our elections for Congress are not decided in November because our congressional districts are so lopsided for one party or another. They're actually decided in the party primaries months before, including today on Super Tuesday, and a quarter of all of our seats in the House of Representatives. And that's why I describe party primaries as being the primary problem in our politics today. It disenfranchises millions of voters and, moreover, has incentives that lead our elected officials to pander to the base of their party rather than represent a true majority of Americans. And ultimately, that's why we see such gridlock in Washington and our inability to address many of the problems that most Americans care about.
And Nick, you used that very loaded word, disenfranchised. I want you to explain to people what you mean. It doesn't mean voters can't participate. But what I think you're saying is because participation rates tend to be lower in primaries, a smaller than imagined sector of voters actually make these decisions.
Well, it's not just that fewer people participate. It is that millions of Americans are prohibited from participating. Those are Americans who are registered as independents, not with one party or another. You know, this election year, Major, we see in 22 states close to 24 million independents who won't be able to participate in either party primary. And they are denied the ability to elect who actually represents them. These include a majority of veterans, a majority of young people. So we're telling folks that are the future of our country, those who fought for our country, that they don't get to have a say. In our view, that's not just wrong, it's un-American. And there's something we can do about it, which is to pass laws at the state level to open primaries, to give every eligible voter the ability to vote for any candidate, regardless of party.
And I really want you to double down on that, Nick, because I think people may not grasp the significance of this. It's a closed primary, and it effectively decides who that member of the House is. It's over, and a not insubstantial number of voters in that congressional district have no chance whatsoever.
Let's just use a concrete example in Arkansas, which is voting today. It has 4 congressional districts. Each of those districts are solidly Republican, which means today's primaries are going to be effectively deciding who represents those districts. And in 3 out of the 4, there's only one candidate on the ballot. It's hard to call that an election at all. And that's really what is fueling so much of the dysfunction in Washington, because Americans are being denied the ability to even hold their leaders accountable. So if we want more accountability and better results in our politics, we have to open up our election system to allow the majority of voters to decide. And that's what states like Alaska and Maine and others this year are going to be voting on to follow suit with those states to open their elections and really empower a majority of voters.
And Nick, you've described the remedy. What's the mechanism to make that remedy real? Is this federal legislation, or do states have to make these determinations one by one?
Well, the reason why I believe primaries are the biggest solvable problem in our politics is because it doesn't require a constitutional amendment or an act of Congress. These are laws that can be changed at the state level. And so we may see in upwards of half a dozen states this year, for example, ballot initiatives that would replace both party primaries with nonpartisan primaries to give all voters the right to vote for whomever they want. And in other states that don't have a ballot initiative process, states like New Mexico and Pennsylvania, there's state-level legislation that state-based organizations that United America is proud to support are working to push through.
And Nick, what's the lived experience in open primary states? They have no partisanship issues at all?
It's not a panacea for all of our challenges, but the lived experience of a candidate, an elected official, is throwing out the old playbook for how they used to win election, which means only knocking on the doors of those primary voters at their party base, and actually going and knocking on the door of every one of their constituents to earn majority support. And that's why I think this can be so powerful for our democracy, to actually have elected officials who care about representing and being responsive to all of their voters, again, not just their party.
And Nick, very quickly, when we talk in Washington about a member of Congress voting a certain way because they're afraid of being primaried, this is what you're actually talking about.
Right. I mean, one of the races, again, we see today is Tony Gonzalez, a Republican in Texas. He voted for marriage equality in Congress. That was unpopular with the base of his party, and now he's being primaried for it. So this is the pernicious incentive that prevents our leaders from working together and representing a majority of their constituents. We solve the primary problem, and we are able to liberate them to represent all of us.
Nick Troiano, thank you very much. Well, that does it for now. Our coverage continues after the break, and we'll be back with a special 2-hour edition of America Decides at 8 p.m. Eastern. Cover all the results as they come in on this possibly historic Super Tuesday. Primetime with John Dickerson begins coverage as the first polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern. You know this already, and you're happy about it. Just a quick reminder, you are streaming CBS News.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death